Carson gives you guys things you can't get in San Diego. The PSLs,
Right.
the luxury suites, signage, a $1.7 billion stadium that you might not get in San Diego, right? Why would Joe Fan think that there's any hope of getting one in San Diego if all these things that you guys want are available there in Carson?
Well, the biggest reason is that Dean Spanos and his family have done everything they could possibly have done over the last 13 years to keep the team in San Diego. So they want to keep the team here.
Yeah.
And clearly they're willing to take a deal that's not as lucrative as a Los Angeles deal to keep a team here. But at the same time, if there's no deal here, if there's nothing,
Right.
that's when you have to look at alternatives. But at some point, you have to protect your other options. Because if you don't, imagine you end up with no stadium deal in San Diego. You end up with two other teams in Los Angeles, wiping out your local business from there. You have no leverage anymore
Right.
because there's no other place to go. I doubt the city would even return our phone calls if there were two teams in Los Angeles. So that's the nightmare scenario that you can't allow to happen.
If you get a stadium in San Diego, it's all right that a team comes to LA or maybe
Sure.
two teams.
Sure, because a stadium in San Diego allows you to generate more revenue. And so you end up just fine, if we could get it done.
Well, I think that's the other thing that Joe Fan would say is that if you've got 13,
Yeah.
14 years, right, that you've been trying.
Joe Fan's right about that. I mean, it's a good question.
Right, and now you've got a few months that something new is going to pop up or something old is going to be revisited and
Right.
suddenly work. How do you think, do you think that that's viable? Do you think that that's...
It's viable because the city is now motivated to
Yeah.
work with this. I think for the last 13 years, as two city councilmen said today in a resolution that they introduced,
I saw.
the city hasn't done anything. The city has never put a proposal on the table. It's always been the Chargers' 9 different proposals trying to get something done. So now finally I think we have the city saying, okay, we realize this is it. The level of urgency that's there now is the level that we wanted to see back in January. When Mr. Kroenke made his move in Inglewood, we thought that would create urgency for everybody, and it really didn't.
There are some fans out there that I guess it's still sitting a little poorly with them
Sure.
that, you guys would think of going into a stadium deal with the Raiders. Now,
Sure.
I should mention that having reported on the team for a number of years, rivalries are mostly fan-based. They're really business trumps rivalry, but that being said, they don't like it. Do you worry at all that this is all going to turn fans off rather
Sure.
than scare them?
Sure. No, we talk about that a lot because obviously the fans here are the most important things to us, and if we lose them, it's a disaster for us. So at the same time, we try to explain that these stadiums are really hard to build, as we know, and they're much easier to build if you have two teams pitching into one stadium.
If one team does bow out, or if the Raiders bow out, are you still able to go forward alone?
That would be the decision of the remaining team to make. The project could be financed by one team.
Okay.
It would be more difficult, but it could be financed by one team.
Do you guys have a best case scenario? I know moving downtown and being part of the convention center was, but have you changed? Have you shifted at all?
Well, Dean told the mayor on Sunday when they met that he was agnostic as to the site. In other words, if we could finance it on a site at Qualcomm, he would be fine with that.
Right. And Mark, is there a way to get it done without the 2/3 vote?
That's the question that has flummoxed us for 13 years, and so
Magical answer is right around the corner. I feel it.
so many of these twists and turns that we've had, they always in the end run up against the same brick wall, and that is you need a
Yes.
2/3 vote. So it's tough.
I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but if that doesn't happen and you can't get past the 2/3 vote and it doesn't go through and say Carson doesn't go through either, where does that leave you guys? Where does that leave the Chargers, especially if some fans have soured over what's happened in the last few months?
Well, that would be the worst case scenario for us, right? Is we don't get anything done here, but we've alienated fans.
Right.
And at the same time, nothing happens in Los Angeles for us, and two other teams move to Los Angeles. That's the worst case scenario for us. I don't think that's going to happen. I think fans, now that the dust has settled, I think people understand really what's going on.
The Chargers still have to play a whole season here. Is there any thought to it being like a lame duck season where people are apathetic? They don't know what is going to happen, so they don't really care.
It's what we talked about when we said, should we ratchet up the pressure in
Right.
San Diego? The downside of doing that is you create the impression that you may be leaving and that therefore you're going to have a lame duck season. But we thought it was the right thing to do in that if we didn't ratchet up the pressure, nothing was going to happen this year.
Right.
And then at the end of the year, if we filed for relocation, people would say, well, why didn't you
Yeah.
You never really wanted to stay, because if you did, you wouldn't have just let this whole year disappear on you.
How quickly could these things go?
Well, if I'm a fan, this is what I'm watching for. I'm watching for what happens in St. Louis.
Right.
Does the city of St. Louis, the state of Missouri, do they offer a huge amount of public money to the Rams? And if they do, that makes it much harder for the Rams to move.
Right,
So
they can't
that's
leave.
something to watch for in the next couple of months, or even maybe a couple of weeks. Second is, can the stadium get entitled in Carson? I think that's going to play out over the next 2 months, really. Signatures will start to be gathered next week, and then they'll be presented to the city council, just as has happened in Inglewood. So I would be watching that. Does that get hung up anywhere? Does it face a legal challenge? You know, any of the things that could go wrong there.
Because that's going on in Carson right now, right? There's people working on that in Carson
Yes.
to get the signatures and get that moving along.
Yes, and that's what we've asked our fans to understand, that you're going to hear news out of Carson, like things are going to be happening there.
Right.
And that's going to be tough, right? Because people are going to say, oh no, you know, things are moving in Carson. But that's just part of the process, right? To get to the point where you have the legal right to build a stadium. That doesn't mean you're actually going to build it, or it doesn't mean you're actually going to play in it. It just means that you're getting to the point where you have the legal permissions. And then you have to watch what the task force comes up with by May 20th. I think that's the date they've set.
Right.
And then see if it's something that seems like it can work. So those are the three big things that are going to happen in the next couple of months.
So it's still a long road.
It is a long road, and that's what we're trying to.
It's going to change so much,
Many
too.
twists and turns and many bumps in the road, I'm sure, but still a lot of things have to play out for this to be resolved, and that's what we hope fans understand.